Hello, welcome to my lesson on modal brightness, which is, in essence, just a different way to understand the major scale modes. Now, modal brightness, like I said, it's just a different way of thinking of modes. By classifying them based on how bright versus dark they are, which essentially is just a measure of how sharp versus flat they are in relation to one another. You'll see what I mean in a minute. And how this system is mirrored between the major modes and the minor modes. Now, I'm sure you will have seen this before, which is very useful for understanding how the different modes relate to a parent Ionian scale, where each mode is built on a different degree of that scale. This system is more concerned with how different modes built on the same scale relate to one another, both in terms of their intervals and sonically, and the kind of emotional qualities that are often used with these modes in relation to one another. So this system is useful, but it is limited in a lot of ways. Enter the modal onions, which is a diagram I designed to illustrate the symmetricality between the major modes and the minor modes. And to show how, on a spectrum, they can be put from brightest at the top to darkest at the bottom. Start with the major modes. Right. In the center, you have your Ionian mode, which is, of course, the major scale. I'm sure you're familiar with the sound of that. Going brighter than the major scale means to sharpen from the major scale, which, of course, gives you Lydian. And conversely, to go darker will give you Mixolydian, where you flatten, in this case, flatten the 7th degree for Lydian. It's sharpen the 4th, of course. Now, this is mirrored in the minor modes. How in the center, again, is the Aeolian mode, or the natural minor scale, of course. And to go darker is Phrygian, where you flatten, giving the characteristic flat 2nd degree. And to sharpen gives you Dorian, which has its major 6th degree. Now, this diagram I feel is useful not only to show how this spectrum can be broken down from brightest to darkest, but also how the different modes relate to each other, how some are more distant than others. For instance, Lydian and Phrygian are very distant to one another in terms of the notes that they carry, whereas Mixolydian and Dorian are very close together. And this is reflected often in how they're used in many songs and many compositions. Now, to go, like I said, of course, to go between the different modes, you just simply sharpen or you flatten one of the notes. Now, you might be wondering, how do you know which notes to sharpen or flatten? Well, this brings us to the pentatonic scale. I'm sure you're familiar with this. It's just the major scale or the minor scale with the 4th or the 7th and the 2nd and the 6th removed. Now, I'll show you something now. The notes that are altered between from the major and minor scale, I should say, to their respective modes are the same notes that are missing from their pentatonics. And this is, again, symmetrical, as you can see by the color coding here. So this is a really handy, easy way to remember which notes are in which modes. Now you might be sitting there wondering, those perceptive among you, and this is for the advanced students, might be wondering, what about Locrian? Now, Locrian is the darkest of the modes, as we all know. It doesn't fit neatly into this model, and so we can think of it as disconnected from the other modes. As you can see, because of its flattened fifth degree, it's very unstable. It's very rarely used, in fact. But here's a question. You keep going darker. You're at the darkest point, right? What happens if you go darker again? You flatten the first degree. Now, enharmonically, that is the same as that. What scale is that? You tell me. Thank you very much for listening, for watching. See you next time.